When a single mom walked into her first date carrying her baby, no one expected what would follow. But in that moment of judgment and surprise, destiny began to rewrite itself. From shocking truths to an act of courage that would change everything, this story will keep you on the edge until the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment which country you're watching from. Your support means the world to us. Megan pressed the side button of her iPhone, lighting up the screen again. The bright digits mocked her, 15 minutes late. She sighed, trying to steady her breathing. A first meeting was already nerve-wracking, but with Ethan wriggling in her arms and fussing, the anxiety doubled. His soft whimper rose into a half-cry, his tiny fists rubbing tiredly against his eyes. She rocked him gently, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Just a few more minutes." The cafe's glass doors reflected her own nervous face back at her, dark circles under her eyes from late nights, hair pulled into a practical bun, a diaper bag slung over her shoulder like armor. Megan hesitated, then pushed the door open. The sound hit her instantly, clattering cups, bursts of laughter, the hiss and grind of the espresso machine. The air smelled of roasted beans and baked goods. Conversations blended into a hum that made Ethan turn his head curiously, his earlier whimpers softening as he soaked in the busy atmosphere. Megan scanned the room. Dozens of strangers, students with laptops, professionals in suits, a group of friends taking selfies. Her pulse raced. Would she even recognize him? Daniel's online profile had only 2 pictures, one at a wedding in a suit, the other a blurry selfie outdoors. Not much to go on. Her doubts grew heavier with every step. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he wouldn't come at all. She was about to retreat when a deep voice called from behind her, "Excuse me, are you Megan?" Her body froze. Slowly, she turned. A tall man stood a few feet away, holding a phone in one hand and wearing a crisp, light blue dress shirt tucked neatly into dark jeans. His brown hair was freshly cut, his expression warm but tentative. His eyes dropped almost instantly to Ethan, who had gone silent, staring at the stranger with wide eyes. "That's me," Megan managed, her cheeks heating. The man smiled. "I'm Daniel, and, sorry I kept you waiting. Traffic was brutal. You're Daniel." The relief and disbelief in her voice slipped out before she could stop it. Guilty. His smile widened, but not in an arrogant way. It was easy, genuine. The kind of smile that made you want to believe him, and this little guy. Daniel's eyes softened as they lingered on Ethan. Must be Ethan, right? Megan's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't told him about Ethan, not directly. Months of late-night chats, sharing jokes, stories, even little pieces of her dreams. Yet she had always stopped short of mentioning her son. Fear of rejection had silenced her every time. You know about him?" she whispered, her voice shaky. Daniel chuckled quietly. "You posted a photo last week. He's got those big, curious eyes. Cute kid." Her face flushed crimson. She'd forgotten about that photo, Ethan asleep on her chest after a long day. It had been a moment of weakness, of honesty, and apparently Daniel had seen it. Megan braced herself for judgment, for the inevitable awkward exit. But instead, Daniel crouched slightly, extending a finger toward Ethan. "Hey there, buddy." To Megan's surprise, Ethan immediately gripped Daniel's finger with surprising strength. Daniel's laughter bubbled out. "Wow, strong little guy. Already knows how to make an impression." The unexpected tenderness twisted something inside Megan. She had prepared herself for rejection, but Daniel didn't look unsettled. If anything, he seemed comfortable. "Why don't we sit?" Daniel gestured toward a quieter corner table, his tone casual but considerate. "You both look like you could use a break." Megan hesitated, then nodded, following him. He smoothly pulled out a chair for her, moving another aside so she had space for the diaper bag. "Small gestures, but they mattered. What'll it be?" he asked once she was seated. "Coffee, a snack." "Just a latte, thank you." "Ethan's fine. He already ate." Daniel gave a nod, then walked to the counter. Megan watched closely. He wasn't impatient, wasn't fidgeting. He spoke to the barista with calm politeness, smiling occasionally, even waiting patiently when the cashier fumbled with the register. Her chest tightened. This wasn't what she expected. She had braced for disappointment, for a man who would see Ethan as baggage. Instead, he carried himself like none of this was a burden. When he returned, he set down 2 steaming mugs and a plate of cookies. "Thought you might be hungry." "Thanks," Megan said softly, adjusting Ethan on her lap. He'd begun tugging at the buttons on her blouse, babbling nonsense syllables. "Megan," Daniel leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle but direct. "You don't have to explain right now. I get it. Raising a kid alone isn't easy. And letting someone new into that world, well, that's scary. You don't owe me an apology for that." Her throat tightened. She blinked rapidly, surprised by his understanding. "Most men would have left by now," she admitted, her voice breaking just a little. Daniel gave a small shrug. "I'm not most men." As if on cue, Ethan let out a loud burp. Both adults burst into laughter, the tension melting. Daniel made a goofy face at the baby, crossing his eyes, and Ethan rewarded him with a gummy smile. "You're a natural," Megan said before she could stop herself. "Hardly," Daniel grinned. "But I'll take the compliment." He studied Ethan for a moment. "How old is he?" 8 months. He's just starting to crawl. Keeps me on my toes." Daniel hesitated. "And his dad?" Megan's smile faltered. She looked down at her cup. "He's not in the picture. Hasn't been since the beginning. It's just me and Ethan." Daniel gave a slow nod, not pressing further. "Well," he said after a pause, "looks like you're doing an amazing job. He's happy, healthy. That says a lot about his mom." Her eyes stung unexpectedly. Nobody had said that to her in a long time. Ethan yawned, his small head leaning against her chest. Megan stroked his hair gently. "He's getting sleepy. I should probably head out before he melts down." Daniel shook his head quickly. "Not yet, unless you really have to. There's a park down the street. The walk might help him nap," she blinked. "You want to go to a park?" "With us? Why not?" Daniel's tone was easy, steady. "I wasn't expecting a typical date anyway." "Honestly, this feels better." Megan studied him, searching for cracks in his sincerity. But his eyes were calm, patient. There was no judgment, no hidden irritation. "Okay," she said finally. Daniel stood and offered his hand to help her up. "Let's go then." As she slid her hand into his, a warmth spread through her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not just relief, but hope. And as the 3 of them stepped out of the cafe together, Megan realized this wasn't the disastrous beginning she had feared. It might just be the start of something she had long stopped believing in, a chance at love, and maybe a family. The late afternoon sun painted the streets of Boston in shades of gold and amber. As Megan stepped out of the cafe, Ethan nestled snugly in her arms. The air carried the faint scent of blooming lilacs from a nearby florist, mixed with the aroma of roasted coffee beans, wafting from the cafe behind them. Cars rolled lazily down the avenue, and children's laughter echoed from somewhere close. Daniel walked beside her, his pace steady, careful not to rush. He carried himself with the ease of someone who had no reason to pretend. His hands were in his pockets, but every now and then he glanced toward Megan and Ethan, as though reminding himself this moment was real. "There's a park just a block away," he said. "It's quiet this time of day. Perfect for a nap walk." Megan adjusted Ethan against her shoulder, his small head beginning to droop with sleep. "Are you sure? I mean, this isn't exactly how people imagine a first date," Daniel chuckled. "Honestly, I don't know what I expected, but this feels right. Better, actually." The words hung between them, disarming in their simplicity. Megan's heart skipped. She wasn't used to men who spoke with that kind of honesty. As they reached the park entrance, the world seemed to shift. The buzz of traffic gave way to the rustling of leaves, the chirp of birds, and the faint splash of a fountain somewhere in the distance. Families lounged on picnic blankets, joggers passed with rhythmic strides, and an elderly man sat feeding crumbs to a cluster of pigeons. Daniel spotted a young mother folding up a stroller by the gate. He approached her with a polite smile. "Excuse me, would you mind if we borrowed this? Just for a short walk. Her little one needs to nap." The woman studied him for a second, then glanced at Megan and Ethan. Something in their faces must have reassured her, because she nodded and handed over the stroller. "Thank you," Megan said, a little stunned by his boldness. No problem, the woman replied warmly. Babies always sleep better with motion. Daniel carefully unfolded the stroller and held it steady as Megan laid Ethan down. The baby squirmed a little but soon settled, soothed by the gentle rhythm as Daniel began to push. Megan walked beside him, her steps slower now, more relaxed. The late sun filtered through the trees, dappling the path with shifting patches of light and shadow. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was natural. Finally, Daniel broke it. You know, when we first started talking online, I thought you were someone else. Megan looked up, puzzled. Someone else? Yeah, there was a girl in college, Lucy Ferris. I thought your profile belonged to her. Similar smile in the picture. I messaged you thinking I'd reconnected with an old classmate. Megan laughed softly, shaking her head. So it all started with a mistake. Pretty much, Daniel admitted with a grin. But the funny thing is, when you said you weren't Lucy, I could have just stopped. Most people would have. Instead, I stayed. I wanted to keep talking to you. Megan felt warmth creeping into her chest. Why? Daniel shrugged, his eyes scanning the path ahead. Because you felt real. No games, no pretenses. Just you. Her throat tightened. For months, their nightly chats had been her escape. Moments stolen between diaper changes and late freelance projects. She had shared pieces of herself, her love of books, her dreams of someday opening her own design studio. But always, she had left Ethan out of the picture, terrified of what the truth might cost. You know, I left a lot unsaid, she murmured. I know, Daniel said softly, and now I understand why. But the part you did share, that was enough to make me want to meet you in person, to see if what I felt through a screen was real. Ethan stirred in the stroller, kicking his tiny legs as if punctuating the moment. Daniel glanced down, his expression softening. Looks like he's listening in. Megan chuckled, brushing a stray hair from her face. He's curious about everything. They walked on until they reached a small lake in the park. Ducks glided lazily across the surface, their ripples catching the sunlight. Daniel guided the stroller to a wooden bench overlooking the water. He sat first, then motioned for Megan to join him. Ethan was already half asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the stroller's gentle motion. Megan leaned back, the tension in her shoulders finally loosening. You're good with him, she said quietly. Daniel looked almost embarrassed. I don't know what I'm doing, honestly. I've never held a baby before today. You're kidding. Nope. Only child, no cousins, close in age. Babies have always been foreign territory. He glanced at Ethan with a small smile. But he makes it easy. He's got this way of making you want to try. Megan's chest ached at the sincerity in his voice. For so long, she had carried the weight of motherhood alone. Every decision, every sleepless night, every worry about the future. Hearing someone speak of her son with such tenderness was like water to parched soil. She swallowed hard. Most men wouldn't react like this. I told you, Daniel said, meeting her eyes. I'm not most men. A quiet moment stretched between them, broken only by the soft quacks of ducks and Ethan's faint sighs. Can I ask you something personal? Daniel's voice was careful, tentative. Megan hesitated, then nodded. Do you ever feel like you lost yourself? Since becoming a mom, I mean. Her eyes widened. It wasn't the question she expected, but it was the question she needed. All the time, she admitted, her voice cracking. Before Ethan, I used to read a book every week. I used to paint. I used to have a life. Now everything is diapers, feedings, deadlines. Don't get me wrong, I love him more than anything. But sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be me again. Daniel didn't look away, didn't flinch. He just listened, really listened. That doesn't make you a bad mother, he said finally. It makes you human. And from where I'm sitting, Ethan looks pretty happy, which means you're doing something very, very right. The words undid her. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling before she could stop them. I'm sorry, she whispered, brushing them away. Hormones, exhaustion. Don't apologize, Daniel said gently. You're allowed to feel. You're allowed to be more than just Ethan's mom. You're Megan, and that matters. She stared at him, stunned by the depth of his kindness. Nobody had told her that in months, maybe years. Ethan stirred again, his tiny fingers curling around the edge of the blanket. Megan bent to adjust it, and when she looked back up, Daniel was watching her, not with pity, but with quiet admiration. "You're incredible," he said simply. Her heart stuttered. She wanted to argue, to push back, but the sincerity in his gaze made it impossible. For the first time in what felt like forever, Megan allowed herself to believe that maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. The evening air had cooled by the time Megan and Daniel left the park. The sky was washed in pink and lavender, streaked with the last rays of sunlight. Street lamps flickered awake, casting warm pools of light along the quiet sidewalks. Ethan was fast asleep in the stroller, his tiny chest rising and falling, his fist still clutching the corner of his blanket as though guarding some dream. Megan walked in silence for a while, letting the soft creak of the stroller wheels fill the quiet between them. Her mind was a storm. Gratitude, fear, longing, disbelief, all swirling together. She had expected rejection tonight. She had rehearsed the awkward excuses he might give before leaving. But Daniel was still here, strolling beside her as if she, Ethan the stroller, were not an obstacle but something natural. Daniel glanced at her, reading the expression on her face. "You look like you're holding 100 thoughts at once," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "That's about right. Want to share any of them?" Megan hesitated, then sighed. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize this is too much. Most people see a single mom, and they run the other way." Daniel stopped walking for a moment, his hand resting lightly on the stroller handle. "Megan, do I look like I'm running?" The words were simple, but they cut straight through her defenses. She blinked back tears, quickly looking away. They reached a quiet block lined with brownstone buildings. Their windows glowed with the soft light of lamps and televisions. Families gathered for dinner inside. Daniel pointed toward a small Italian restaurant on the corner, its front decorated with strings of warm fairy lights. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "They have great takeout. We could sit outside for a bit if Ethan stays asleep." Megan's instinct was to refuse. She rarely stopped for herself, her mind always on Ethan's needs. But her stomach growled in betrayal. She hadn't eaten since morning. I guess I could eat," she admitted. Daniel smiled. "Good. My treat." Minutes later, they were seated at a small iron table beneath the restaurant's awning. The night carried a soft breeze, and the distant hum of city traffic mingled with faint music from the restaurant speakers. Daniel ordered lasagna for himself, a chicken Alfredo for Megan, and sparkling water for both. Megan glanced at Ethan, still sleeping peacefully, then back at Daniel. "You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to," he said simply. "Besides, you deserve to eat a real meal, not just survive on coffee and granola bars." Her laugh came out shaky. "That's exactly what I had for breakfast," I figured. Daniel's grin widened, but his eyes were serious. "You've been carrying the world on your shoulders, haven't you?" Megan fiddled with her napkin. "I've been trying." The food arrived steaming and fragrant, the plates generous. Megan's stomach tightened at the first bite. It had been so long since she'd eaten something hot, something made for her, instead of something rushed. Daniel watched her reaction and chuckled. "That good?" "Better," she admitted with a blush. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, until Daniel set down his fork. "Can I ask you something, Megan?" She looked up cautiously. "Go ahead. Why did you agree to meet me tonight? I mean, after all those months of chatting, why now?" Megan froze, considering. She could lie, say it was casual curiosity. But something about Daniel's steady gaze urged her to speak the truth. "Because I liked you," she said quietly. "Because I didn't want to keep hiding. If you were going to walk away, I'd rather know now than later." Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "And what if I told you walking away never even crossed my mind?" Her breath caught. She wasn't used to words like that, words without hesitation. Ethan stirred in the stroller, letting out a tiny squeak before drifting back into slumber. Both Megan and Daniel instinctively leaned toward him at the same time, their heads close enough that their foreheads nearly touched. Megan felt a shiver run through her, not of fear, but of something she hadn't allowed herself in years. Connection. Pulling back slightly, she tried to steady herself. "You're making this feel too easy." "Maybe it doesn't always have to be hard," Daniel said gently. "Maybe you don't always have to fight alone." The words struck deep. For so long, her life had been about survival, balancing Ethan's needs, work deadlines, bills, and loneliness. The idea that someone might want to share that burden with her felt almost unreal. She looked away, her voice trembling. "What if you change your mind later? What if you realize I'm too much, that Ethan is too much?" Daniel reached across the table, his hand resting lightly over hers. "Then I'd be the biggest fool alive. Because right now, sitting here with you, this feels like the first time in years that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Megan stared at him, her throat tight. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But a lifetime of disappointment pressed against her chest like a weight. Before she could reply, a shadow fell across their table. A young woman in a sleek black dress and sharp heels stood there, her lips curved in a smirk. Well, Daniel Whitmore. "I didn't think I'd find you here," she said. Her eyes slid to Megan, then down to the stroller. "And who's this?" Megan stiffened instantly, her protective instincts flaring. Ethan stirred at the sudden shift in energy, letting out a soft cry. She bent quickly to soothe him. Daniel's expression tightened. "Sabrina, what are you doing here?" "Just having dinner with friends," the woman said lightly, though her tone carried an edge. "Imagine my surprise when I see you—" "Playing house." Megan's stomach dropped. The ease of the evening shattered, replaced with a chill. She didn't know who this woman was, but the way she looked at Daniel and at Ethan set alarm bells ringing in her mind. Daniel's jaw clenched. "Sabrina, this isn't the time." "Oh, but it is," Sabrina replied, folding her arms. "Because I think your new situation deserves some clarity. Don't you agree, Megan?" The tension at the table thickened, and Megan realized this night was far from over. The night air seemed to still around them as Sabrina stood at the table, her presence sharp and intrusive, like a shard of glass in the middle of something delicate. Her eyes flicked once more to the stroller, where Ethan had begun to fuss, his whimpers threatening to rise into a cry. Megan bent down, instinctively shielding her son, whispering, "Shh, it's okay, baby," while rocking the stroller gently. Daniel's jaw tightened, his posture rigid. "Sabrina," he said evenly, though there was a dangerous undertone in his voice. "You don't belong here." "Oh, but I do," Sabrina replied smoothly, stepping closer. The golden glow of the restaurant lights glinted off her earrings, her entire presence polished and intimidating. "This is a public place, Daniel. I have every right to be here. Besides," she leaned slightly toward Megan, her gaze like a scalpel. "Don't you think the woman sitting across from you deserves to know a few things about the man she's wasting her time on?" Megan looked up, startled. "Excuse me?" "Don't listen to her," Daniel snapped quickly. But Sabrina ignored him. "You should know," Sabrina continued, her voice syrupy sweet but laced with venom, "that Daniel here has a very particular pattern. He gets interested fast, he makes promises fast, but when reality sets in, Enough," Daniel cut in, standing now, his chair scraping loudly against the pavement. His tall frame cast a shadow over Sabrina, but she didn't flinch. Megan's pulse pounded in her ears. She held Ethan's tiny hand instinctively, trying to steady herself. Everything had shifted so suddenly. One moment she was beginning to feel safe, and now she felt exposed, cornered, confused. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel asked, his voice low and furious. "Why here? Why now?" Sabrina's lips curved into a smirk. "Because you don't see it, Daniel, but I do. You're throwing your life away for—" Her gaze slid to Megan with deliberate cruelty, a woman with baggage, a baby that isn't yours. And sooner or later, you're going to realize it. The words hit Megan like a physical blow. She swallowed hard, her throat tight, her eyes burning. Ethan let out a soft wail, as if sensing his mother's distress. Megan scooped him up, cradling him against her chest, rocking gently to calm him. Her heart screamed that she should leave, escape this humiliating confrontation, but her feet felt anchored. Daniel's voice thundered then, loud enough that nearby diners turned to watch. "Sabrina, stop. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough, she said coldly. I know your mother has always expected more for you, and I know you're blinded right now. But when that blindness wears off, when the weight of her problems becomes your burden, don't say I didn't warn you. The mention of his mother seemed to slice through Daniel. Megan saw it in the flicker of hesitation in his eyes, the way his shoulders stiffened. He loved his mother deeply, that much was clear. And Sabrina knew it. She wielded the truth like a knife. Megan felt suddenly very small at that table. Here she was, clutching her child, with two people arguing over her as though she weren't even present. Shame crept over her like a shadow. I think we should go, she whispered, standing with Ethan in her arms. Daniel turned instantly. Oh, Megan, no, please. Don't let her. But Megan shook her head, her voice trembling. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have. She broke off, too overwhelmed to finish. Daniel's chest tightened. He reached toward her, his voice softer now, desperate. Megan, don't. Please don't walk away because of her. None of what she's saying matters, doesn't it? Megan's eyes flashed with pain. She's right about one thing. You don't know me. Not really. And I don't know you. How can I know if you'll stay? How can I know you won't change your mind tomorrow? Ethan whimpered in her arms, and Megan kissed his forehead, whispering, It's okay, sweetheart, Mommy's here. Daniel's throat ached. He wanted to grab Sabrina and throw her out of their lives, but he knew the damage had already been done. He turned back, his voice cracking. Megan, give me a chance to prove it, please. But Megan's expression was guarded now, a wall rising between them. I can't risk Ethan's heart, she said softly. It's not just mine on the line anymore. And with that, she turned and began to walk toward the street. Ethan clinging to her shoulder. Daniel watched her go, his fists clenched at his sides, his heart pounding with the fear that he had just lost something irreplaceable. Sabrina's voice broke the silence behind him. You'll thank me one day, Daniel. He spun, his glare sharp enough to cut glass. No. One day you'll realize you destroyed the only good thing I've had in years. For once, Sabrina didn't have a response. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly. He turned back toward the direction Megan had gone, her figure already swallowed by the darkening street. He wanted to chase after her, to shout, to beg, but he froze. Something inside him whispered that maybe the more he pushed, the more she would retreat. So instead, he stood under the glow of the street lamp, torn between rage and heartbreak. While the night moved on around him, Megan, meanwhile, walked briskly, clutching Ethan tighter with every step. Her vision blurred with tears, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Back at her small apartment, she laid Ethan in his crib, watching as he curled onto his side, his tiny breaths evening out into sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, pressing her hands against her face. The warmth of Daniel's kindness from earlier warred against the poison of Sabrina's words. And in that lonely silence, Megan wondered if hope was a luxury she simply couldn't afford. The following morning, Daniel woke with a heaviness in his chest that refused to fade. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Megan walking away with Ethan clutched against her shoulder, her expression torn between pain and determination. He replayed his own helplessness over and over, the way he had stood there, rooted in place, while the one person he wanted to hold on to most slipped through his fingers. He sat at his kitchen counter, staring at the untouched coffee in front of him. His sleek, modern apartment in downtown Boston looked immaculate, every surface gleaming, every line perfect, yet it felt empty, cold, lifeless. No baby laughter echoing in the corners, no soft hum of a woman warming milk in the microwave. Just silence. And then there was Sabrina. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands, anger surging again. He had known she was possessive, controlling even, but last night had been something else. She had crossed a line. No, she had set fire to the line. And worst of all, she had used his mother as a weapon, invoking Cecilia Whitmore's name as though it were a trump card. His phone buzzed. He didn't need to check the screen. He already knew. Daniel, came his mother's voice when he answered. Calm, cultured, but heavy with purpose. Can you come to dinner tonight? We need to talk. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Mom, I'm not really in the mood for— I insist, Cecilia interrupted. It's important. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. The call ended before he could argue. At 7 sharp, Daniel walked up the stone steps of his mother's grand townhouse in Beacon Hill. The Whitmore home radiated old money sophistication, antique furniture, crystal chandeliers, a grand piano polished to a shine. Cecilia greeted him in the foyer, her posture perfect, her silver-streaked hair swept into an elegant bun. "You look tired," she remarked, kissing his cheek with cool lips. "Sit, dinner is ready." They moved into the dining room where a long mahogany table gleamed under soft candlelight. A 3-course meal was laid out as though for company, though it was just the two of them. Cecilia believed in appearances even in private. Daniel sat stiffly waiting. He knew this wasn't about food. Finally, after a few moments of silence filled only by the clink of silverware, Cecilia folded her hands neatly on the table. "I heard from Sabrina last night." Daniel's fork froze midway to his mouth. "Of course you did. She told me she saw you. In public, with a woman. And a baby." Cecilia's eyes fixed sharply on him. "Is it true?" Daniel set his fork down carefully. "Yes, her name is Megan, and her son is Ethan." His mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Daniel, have you lost your mind?" "No," he said firmly, though his voice trembled with contained emotion. "For the first time in years, I feel like I've found it." Cecilia inhaled slowly, as though gathering patience. "Do you understand what this looks like? You, a man of your position, entangled with a woman of questionable circumstances?" Daniel's hands curled into fists under the table. "What circumstances?" "She's a designer, working her tail off to provide for her child. She's honest, kind, resilient. She's everything you raised me to value. And yet," Cecilia said sharply, "she brings with her complications you cannot ignore. A child that is not yours. A father, unknown, absent, who could reappear at any moment. Financial strain, social stigma. Do you want that hanging over your future? Over our family's name?" "Family's name?" Daniel snapped, his voice rising. "This isn't about our name, Mom. This is about my life, my heart. And last night, she walked away because people like you and Sabrina think she's not good enough." The table rattled as his fist came down. "She is good enough, more than good enough." For a rare moment, Cecilia flinched, but she quickly recovered, her tone icy. "Daniel, you are 35 years old. A CEO. You have responsibilities. You cannot let infatuation blind you." "Infatuation." Daniel laughed bitterly. "That woman has more strength in her than half the people who sit on my board of directors. She raised Ethan alone, with no safety net, no help, no handouts. Do you know what that takes? Do you?" Cecilia's eyes flickered, but her expression remained stern. "What it takes is exactly why you should be cautious. Women like that—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "They see a man like you as a solution." The accusation sliced deep. Daniel pushed back his chair, abruptly standing. "That's what Sabrina told you, isn't it? That Megan is after my money, my stability, my status. And you believed her." Cecilia's silence was confirmation enough. Daniel leaned across the table, his voice low and furious. "You don't know her. You don't know the nights she stays up working while Ethan sleeps just to keep food on the table. You don't know the way her eyes light up when Ethan takes a new step, or the way she reads him stories in silly voices until he giggles. You don't know her heart." His chest heaved. "But I do, and I love her." The words slipped out before he could stop them, raw and undeniable. Cecilia's composure cracked. Her eyes widened just slightly, the tiniest fracture in her mask of control. "You love her," she repeated, almost disbelieving. "Yes." His voice softened, but it carried the weight of truth. "And if you can't see why, then maybe you don't know me at all." He turned on his heel, striding out of the dining room. His mother called his name, but he didn't look back. Outside, the night air struck him like a slap. He walked quickly down the stone steps, his heart pounding. For a moment, he stood under the street lamp, staring at his car, fighting the storm inside him. All he wanted was to see Megan, to hold Ethan again, to tell them both that they mattered more than anything. But he hesitated. What if she didn't open the door? What if she had already decided it was over? He climbed into the car, gripping the wheel. The city stretched before him, alive with lights and possibility. But his chest ached with doubt. At that same moment, in her small apartment across town, Megan sat cross-legged on the floor with Ethan crawling clumsily in circles around her. The glow of her laptop screen lit her tired face as she tried to finish a freelance project, but her eyes kept drifting to her phone. It sat silent on the table, no new messages. She bit her lip, brushing Ethan's hair softly as he giggled at his own reflection in a toy mirror. "It's just us, baby," she whispered. Maybe it's always going to be just us, but deep down, she didn't believe that. She couldn't forget the look on Daniel's face in the park, or the way Ethan had smiled at him, reaching out with trusting hands. She closed her laptop with a sigh, staring out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Daniel was fighting his own battles, and Megan didn't know if he would win them, or if they would destroy whatever fragile hope they had begun to build together. The city moved at its usual rhythm, horns blaring, neon signs flickering, footsteps echoing on the sidewalks. But for Daniel, everything felt muted, like he was walking inside a fog. After storming out of his mother's house, he had driven aimlessly for almost an hour, circling familiar streets with no destination in mind. His thoughts returned again and again to Megan, to Ethan, to the way Megan's eyes had darkened with doubt when Sabrina's words poisoned the air between them. Finally, he pulled into a quiet street near Megan's apartment building. The lights in her window were still on, the soft glow spilling into the night. He sat in his car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart hammering with a mix of fear and resolve. What if she didn't want to see him? What if he had already lost his chance? But he couldn't leave things like this. Daniel climbed out of the car, his footsteps crunching against the gravel as he crossed to the building. He climbed the narrow staircase 2 steps at a time, pausing at her door. The wood was worn, the brass numbers slightly crooked, but to him, it felt like the threshold to a world he desperately wanted to enter. He raised his hand and knocked gently. Inside, Megan sat on the couch, Ethan asleep in her arms. She froze at the sound. Her heart knew immediately who it was. For a long moment, she didn't move, torn between the ache to see him and the instinct to protect herself. Finally, with trembling hands, she laid Ethan carefully in his crib, pulling the blanket over his small frame. She brushed a kiss across his forehead, then walked slowly to the door. When she opened it, Daniel stood there, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes burning with something fierce. "Megan," he breathed, as though just saying her name eased something inside him. She held the door halfway, her body blocking the entrance. "It's late, Daniel." "I know," he said quickly, "but I had to come." "Please, just let me talk." Megan's jaw tightened. "Talk? Last night you let someone else do all the talking for you. And I was the one left standing there, humiliated, holding my son while strangers stared." Daniel winced, pain flashing across his face. "You're right. I should have shut Sabrina down the second she opened her mouth. I should have run after you instead of freezing like a coward. I know I failed you, Megan, and I'm sorry." Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "Sorry doesn't undo the damage, Daniel. I can handle judgment when it's aimed at me. But when someone looks at Ethan like he's a mistake, that's where I draw the line." Daniel's chest constricted. "Ethan isn't a mistake." His voice broke, and he pressed a hand against the doorframe, steadying himself. "He's incredible. And I swear to you, Megan, I don't care what anyone else says. My mother, Sabrina, the whole world, if it comes to that. You and Ethan are not baggage. You're not a problem. You're everything I didn't know I needed." Megan's breath caught at the rawness in his words. She searched his face for dishonesty, for hesitation, but found none. His vulnerability both terrified and disarmed her. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling, "why are you here?" "Because I can't lose you," he said simply. "Because last night, when you walked away, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. And because today I told my mother I loved you." Megan's lips parted in shock. "You... what?" He nodded, eyes unwavering. "I told her I love you. And I do, Megan, I love you. I love Ethan. I want to be part of your lives, not for a moment, not until things get complicated, but for the long haul. For as long as you'll let me." Her defenses crumbled at those words, tears spilling freely now. She turned away, covering her face with her hands. "You don't understand what you're asking. My life isn't easy. There are nights I barely sleep, days I don't eat until evening. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing at everything. And I can't," her voice broke into sobs, "I can't risk Ethan growing attached to someone who might leave." Daniel stepped forward, gently taking her hands away from her face. His touch was warm, steady. "Then let me prove I won't leave. Let me show Ethan that not every man walks away. Let me show you that love doesn't have to vanish when things get hard." For a long moment, Megan just stared at him, her heart battling her fear, and then, from the crib behind her, a small sound broke the tension. Ethan stirring, blinking awake. His tiny arms reaching upward, Daniel's gaze softened. Without waiting for permission, he stepped inside, crossing to the crib. He bent down, scooping Ethan up with surprising ease. The baby blinked at him, then broke into a gummy smile, babbling happily. Megan's tears flowed harder at the sight. Ethan wasn't cautious with strangers, but his joy at seeing Daniel again was unmistakable. "Hey, champ," Daniel whispered, pressing his forehead lightly against Ethan's. "Did you miss me?" The baby giggled, clutching at Daniel's collar as though answering for himself. Megan's heart cracked wide open. She watched Daniel rocking Ethan gently, his expression tender, almost reverent. No man had ever held her son like that, not even his own father. And in that moment, she realized the truth. Daniel wasn't here to play savior, or to judge, or to pity. He was here because he wanted to be, because he already belonged. She sank onto the couch, overwhelmed, whispering, "Why does this feel so impossible? And yet so right." Daniel looked at her, Ethan cradled against his chest. "Because real things always feel that way at first. But Megan, we can do this, together. We can build something real, something strong." Her heart screamed yes, but fear still lingered at the edges.
She whispered, "And what about your mother?"
"About Sabrina? They're not going to stop." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then they'll learn to live with it, because I've already made my choice." The conviction in his voice was unshakable. And for the first time, Megan allowed herself to believe. She wiped her tears, nodding slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "Then prove it." Daniel's lips curved into a trembling smile, relief flooding his features. "I will, every single day." He sat beside her on the couch, Ethan nestled happily between them. The three of them sat together in the quiet apartment, the city humming softly outside. For the first time in a long while, Megan didn't feel like she was standing alone in a storm. But across town, Sabrina sat in her penthouse apartment, staring out at the glittering skyline. A glass of wine trembled slightly in her hand, her jaw set in determination. She had underestimated Megan once. She would not do it again. If Daniel wouldn't come back to her willingly, then she would tear down everything standing in her way. And the battle for Daniel's heart, and for the fragile family Megan was only beginning to dream of, was far from over. Boston's skyline glittered like 1,000 broken diamonds as Sabrina stood by her penthouse window, the glass of wine untouched in her hand. She could still hear Daniel's voice in her memory, sharp, angry, filled with conviction when he had told her that Megan and Ethan were everything he wanted. It stung like a burn that wouldn't heal. She had known Daniel for nearly 15 years, through college parties and boardroom meetings, through heartbreaks and triumphs. She had waited patiently, convinced that eventually he would see her as the woman meant to stand beside him. But now he was throwing it all away for a single mother who lived in a shoebox apartment and worked freelance jobs to survive. "No," Sabrina whispered to herself, her reflection in the glass hard and unyielding. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." She set her glass down, pulled out her phone and scrolled to a familiar contact. Cecilia Whitmore. Daniel's mother had always trusted her, had always seen Sabrina as the perfect match for her son. If Cecilia was Daniel's anchor, then Sabrina would pull on that chain until he sank. The next afternoon, Cecilia sat in her elegantly decorated sitting room. flipping through a book of society gala photos when her phone rang. Seeing Sabrina's name, she answered at once. "Sabrina, dear, I was just thinking about you."
How are you?
"I'm fine, Mrs. Whitmore," Sabrina said smoothly, her tone carefully measured. "But I'm worried about Daniel."
About the
"Woman he's gotten involved with." Cecilia's expression tightened. "We already discussed this, Sabrina. I tried to reason with him, but he's stubborn. He believes he's in love. That's exactly why we need to act," Sabrina pressed. "This woman, Megan, she's hiding more than you realize. You saw how quickly she latched onto him, how conveniently her child has taken to calling him Dada. Doesn't it feel calculated?" Cecilia hesitated. Her meeting with Megan had left her shaken. She had seen sincerity in the woman's eyes, had felt something soften when Ethan grabbed her finger. But Sabrina's words now stirred the doubts that always lurked beneath her pride. "What do you propose?" Cecilia asked finally. Sabrina smiled, though Cecilia couldn't see it. "We dig deeper. We find out everything about Megan, her finances, her past, the father of her child. If she truly has nothing to hide, then fine. But if there's dirt, we'll uncover it, and Daniel will have no choice but to see the truth." Cecilia exhaled slowly, conflicted. "I don't want to hurt my son." "You're protecting him," Sabrina countered. "And if Megan is as perfect as she pretends, then she has nothing to fear, does she?" Across town, in her small apartment, Megan sat at her dining table with Ethan playing on the floor beside her. She was sketching designs for a client, but her mind kept drifting to Daniel, his sudden visit the night before. The way he had held Ethan as though he'd been born to it. The way his words had trembled with sincerity when he promised he wouldn't leave. Her heart still wrestled with doubt, but something inside her dared to hope again. Daniel wasn't like the others. Maybe, just maybe, she could let herself believe in him. Her phone buzzed with a new message. "Dinner tomorrow. Just the three of us, my place. I'll cook." She smiled despite herself typing back quickly. "We'd love that." Ethan babbled loudly at that moment, holding up a stuffed toy as though celebrating her smile. Megan laughed, pulling him into her lap. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "Maybe this time will be different." She didn't know that. Miles away, forces were moving against her. The following evening, Daniel's penthouse was filled with the warm aroma of roasted chicken and garlic bread. He had set the table himself, placing a small vase of fresh daisies in the center. When Megan arrived with Ethan in her arms, Daniel's face lit up in a way that made her heart squeeze. "Hey, champ," he said, immediately taking Ethan and lifting him high into the air. The baby squealed with laughter, his little hands grabbing at Daniel's hair. Megan stood in the doorway for a moment watching the scene, her throat tight with emotion. Dinner was simple but perfect. They ate, they laughed, they talked about small things, books, movies, favorite places in the city. Daniel insisted on doing the dishes afterward, while Megan played on the floor with Ethan. From the kitchen, he paused to watch them. Megan's head bent close to her son's, her smile wide and unguarded. Something inside him settled then. This wasn't infatuation. This wasn't chance. This was family. He wiped his hands and returned to the living room. "Megan," he said softly, drawing her gaze, "I need you to know I told my mother again today about us, about Ethan, and I didn't ask for her approval." Her heart skipped. And she'll fight it," he admitted honestly. "But I don't care." "I've made my choice." Her breath caught at the fierceness in his voice. For the first time, she truly believed he meant it. Ethan clapped his hands then, as though sealing the moment, and the three of them laughed together. But elsewhere in the city, Sabrina was seated across from a private investigator in a dim cafe booth. She slid an envelope across the table. "I want everything," she said coldly. Her credit history, her work records, the father of her child, everything. "And I don't care how you get it," the man raised a brow. "This could get messy." "Then make it messy," Sabrina snapped. "Because if Daniel won't open his eyes, I'll rip the blindfold off myself." She leaned back, her eyes glittering with determination. "This woman thinks she can take what's mine. She has no idea who she's dealing with." The storm broke quietly at first. Megan didn't notice it in the beginning. It came in the form of little ripples, small disturbances that seemed like coincidences. It started with an email. She had just put Ethan down for his afternoon nap when her laptop pinged with a notification. A client she had been working with, a local boutique, wrote that they were putting her design contract on hold indefinitely. The reason? Unverified concerns about your professional reliability. Megan frowned, reading the words twice. She had delivered every project on time. She had never once missed a deadline. She brushed it off at first, thinking maybe the boutique was struggling financially. But then 2 days later, another client followed. And then another. Within a week, half her freelance contracts were gone. She stared at her dwindling client list, her chest tight. Bills were stacked on the counter. Ethan's formula, his diapers, every dollar mattered. Losing work this way wasn't just inconvenient. It was devastating. Megan called one of the boutique owners, desperate for clarity. "Please, you have to tell me what happened." "I thought you were happy with my work." The woman hesitated, then sighed. "Megan, someone reached out to us. They claimed you'd been unreliable in the past, that you'd been investigated for fraud. We couldn't take the risk. Fraud." Megan's voice cracked. "That's a lie. I'm sorry," the woman interrupted gently. "I really am. But we can't afford to take chances." Megan sat frozen long after the call ended, her hands trembling. Who would do this? Then the answer hit her like a punch. Sabrina. Meanwhile, at Whitmore House, Cecilia sat at her desk, reviewing a thick folder Sabrina had delivered earlier. Inside were printouts of Megan's financial records, unpaid medical bills from Ethan's birth, and a few highlighted notes about her unstable employment. Cecilia's eyes softened for a moment at the sight of the medical bills. She knew how crushing hospital debt could be, but Sabrina's voice in her ear reminded her of the narrative she wanted to believe. "She's drowning, Cecilia," Sabrina had said. "She needs saving. And Daniel, your son, he's the perfect lifeline. Do you really want him tied down to a woman who sees him as a rescue boat?" Cecilia closed the folder, her lips pressed tight. She told herself she was protecting Daniel, but part of her heart whispered she was pushing him further into misery. Across town, Daniel was oblivious to the shadow moving against Megan. His days were busy with board meetings, phone calls, and the constant churn of managing his company. But every night, he made time to see Megan and Ethan, whether it was cooking dinner at her apartment, walking in the park, or simply sitting on the couch with Ethan asleep on his chest. He was falling deeper with every passing day. One night, after laying Ethan gently in his crib, Daniel turned to Megan, his expression serious. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "You shouldn't have to struggle alone anymore. Move in with me." Megan froze. "Daniel." "Hear me out," he said quickly, reaching for her hand. "My place has space. Ethan could have his own room. You wouldn't have to juggle everything on your own anymore. I could help." Her heart pounded. The offer was tempting: safety, stability, love. But fear crept in. What if this is too fast? What if it all falls apart? "Then we'll face it together," Daniel promised, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "I don't want you to carry this weight alone anymore." Tears welled in Megan's eyes. She wanted to say yes. God, she wanted to. But before she could reply, her phone buzzed. She picked it up and her blood ran cold. It was an anonymous message, attached with a photo. The photo showed her holding Ethan outside her apartment, taken from across the street. The caption beneath read, "Is this really the kind of life you want for him? With strangers watching your every move?" Megan's hands shook violently. Oh my God. Daniel took the phone, his face hardening as he read the message. His jaw clenched, fury flashing in his eyes. "She did this," he muttered. "Sabrina. She's been watching you." Megan's whole body trembled. "Daniel, she's stalking me. She's trying to destroy my life." Daniel wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close as she buried her face in his chest. "I won't let her. Do you hear me? I won't let her hurt you or Ethan." But deep down, he knew Sabrina was only getting started. The next morning, Megan's world tilted further. She walked Ethan to the park, hoping to clear her head, only to find two strangers whispering nearby, their eyes darting toward her. One of them pulled out a phone, snapping a photo before turning away. Megan's stomach churned. Whispers spread like fire. People she had never met seemed to know her name, her story, or at least the twisted version Sabrina had planted. When she returned home, another blow waited. A notice taped to her apartment door. Final warning, rent overdue. Pay within 7 days or vacate the premises. She sank against the door, clutching Ethan to her chest, tears streaking her cheeks. It was too much, too fast. She couldn't breathe, and in that moment of despair, Daniel arrived. He took in the sight, the notice, her tears, Ethan's frightened face, and his heart broke without hesitation. He tore the paper from the door, crumpled it, and pulled Megan into his arms. "You're not facing this alone anymore," he said fiercely. "I don't care what Sabrina does. I don't care what my mother thinks. You and Ethan are my family now, and I will protect you both, no matter the cost." His words steadied her, but the war was far from over, because in her penthouse, Sabrina was already planning her next move, one that would strike at the very heart of Megan's fragile hope. The days that followed blurred into a storm of fear and uncertainty for Megan. She woke each morning with a knot in her stomach, unsure of what disaster Sabrina might unleash next. Daniel tried to reassure her, spending as much time as possible at her apartment. But even his presence couldn't erase the creeping sense of being watched. One evening, Megan was giving Ethan his bath when she heard a faint scraping sound outside her window. Her heart seized. The apartment was on the second floor. Nobody should be there. She quickly wrapped Ethan in a towel and carried him to the living room, her hands trembling as she dialed Daniel's number. "Daniel, someone's outside," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Stay inside. Lock the doors." "I'm on my way," he said immediately, his tone sharp and commanding. By the time Daniel arrived minutes later, the noise had stopped. He searched the alley behind the building, finding only a cigarette butt and faint shoe prints in the dirt. Megan clutched Ethan tightly as she watched him through the window, her body taut with dread. When he returned, his face was grim. "She's escalating," Daniel muttered. "This isn't just harassment anymore. She's trying to scare you." The next day, Cecilia Whitmore, Daniel's mother, called him for lunch. Reluctantly, Daniel went, knowing she had been influenced by Sabrina before. Cecilia sat across from him at a white linen table in a private club, her tone calm but her words edged. "Daniel, I've been hearing troubling things about this woman, Megan, about her finances, her reputation. Are you sure she isn't manipulating you?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes blazing. "Mother, everything you've heard is coming from Sabrina. She's lying. She's been stalking Megan. Do you understand? She's dangerous." Cecilia hesitated, for the first time uncertainty flickering across her elegant features. Daniel pressed on. "You raised me to be strong, to make my own choices. My choice is Megan and Ethan. If you can't accept that, then you're going to lose me." The firmness in his voice silenced her. For the first time, Cecilia saw her son not as a boy needing guidance, but as a man willing to fight for the family he was choosing. But Sabrina wasn't finished. 2 nights later, Megan returned home from the grocery store to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Panic surged through her veins. She grabbed Ethan's car seat from the back of the car and hurried inside, her heart hammering. The living room light was on, though she was sure she'd turned it off. On the coffee table sat a single object that hadn't been there before, one of Ethan's stuffed animals. Its head ripped off, a slip of paper pinned to it. The note read, "He deserves better than you." Megan gasped, nearly dropping the grocery bag in her hand. Her legs buckled as she collapsed onto the couch, clutching Ethan to her chest. Tears streamed down her cheeks. When Daniel arrived minutes later, she had barely been able to speak. Coherently on the phone, he took one look at the scene and pulled her into his arms. "That's it," he said fiercely. "You're not staying here another night. Pack your things. Both of you are coming with me." Megan shook her head, her voice breaking. "Daniel, what if she follows us? What if she hurts Ethan?" Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his eyes burning with determination. "Then she'll have to go through me first. And I swear to God, I won't let anything happen to either of you." That night in Daniel's penthouse, Megan sat by Ethan's crib, unable to sleep. The city lights glittered through the window, but her world felt darker than ever. Daniel watched her from the doorway, his chest aching at the sight of her exhaustion. He came and knelt beside her, resting a hand on her knee. "We'll get through this," he whispered. She looked at him, her eyes red but full of quiet strength. "She won't stop, Daniel. Not until she destroys us. Then we'll stop her first," he said, his jaw set. "I'll use every resource I have, lawyers, investigators, whatever it takes." She won't win. Megan wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that love could conquer the poison Sabrina had unleashed. But deep down, she feared the war had only just begun. And in her apartment across town, Sabrina sat in the dark, sipping wine, her phone buzzing with new photos she had secretly taken of Megan and Ethan earlier that day. She scrolled through them slowly, a smile playing at her lips. "Enjoy your fairy tale, Daniel," she murmured, "because I'm about to turn it into a nightmare."